A nuclear war can produce a military winner on a map and still leave no meaningful winner in the world that comes after. That sounds like a slogan, but it is also the central problem of nuclear strategy. In 1985, Ronald Reagan and Mikhail Gorbachev put it in unusually simple language. A nuclear war cannot be won and must never be fought. They were not saying that every nuclear explosion instantly ends civilization. They were saying that once large nuclear arsenals are involved, the normal idea of victory starts to break down. In an ordinary war, victory can mean taking territory, destroying an enemy army, forcing a government to surrender, or protecting your own population while the other side loses the ability to fight. Nuclear weapons attack that logic. A country may destroy military bases, command centers, airfields, and cities, yet still fail at the most basic requirement of victory, keeping its own society functioning. The reason begins with retaliation. A nuclear-armed state does not need every weapon to survive an attack. It only needs enough surviving forces to strike back. During the Cold War, this became the foundation of what is usually called second strike capability. Some weapons were placed in hardened facilities, some on mobile systems, and some at sea, where finding and destroying all of them before they could be used was extraordinarily difficult. You do not need to know the exact locations to understand the problem. If even part of the arsenal survives, the attacker may still face catastrophic retaliation. Picture the decision in a control room. Warning systems report incoming missiles. The information may be incomplete. Communications may be damaged. Leaders have minutes, not days, to decide whether the attack is real, how large it is, and what response is justified. A conventional war can already produce terrible mistakes. Nuclear deterrence places some of the most consequential decisions humans can make inside a system where uncertainty and time pressure are unavoidable. That is why the phrase, "first strike," can be misleading. It sounds like going first gives you control. It may give you initiative, but not control. To make a first strike truly disarming, an attacker would have to destroy enough of the opponent's nuclear forces, command structure, and communications to prevent effective retaliation. Against a large and dispersed arsenal, that is an enormous gamble. Missing a submarine, a mobile launcher, or a surviving command link could be enough for the other side to respond. And retaliation is only the first layer. A nuclear detonation produces several destructive effects at once: blast, extreme heat, and ionizing radiation. Radioactive fallout can expose people beyond the immediate blast area. The CDC notes that people close to a nuclear explosion could be injured or killed by the blast and debris, suffer severe burns, eye damage, and radiation sickness, while fallout can create exposure farther away. These are not separate disasters that arrive politely one after another. They overlap. A hospital after a nuclear attack is a good example of why this matters. The building may be damaged, electricity may be gone, roads may be blocked, staff may be dead, injured, or unable to reach work. Patients with burns, trauma, and radiation exposure arrive at the same time. The International Committee of the Red Cross has repeatedly warned that a nuclear detonation in or near a populated area could destroy medical infrastructure precisely when demand for medical care becomes overwhelming. Hiroshima and Nagasaki demonstrated this problem in 1945, when the only nuclear weapons ever used in war were detonated over populated cities. Modern arsenals and delivery systems are different, and no historical example tells us exactly what a future nuclear conflict would look like. But the basic lesson is not ambiguous. Destroying a city also destroys the systems needed to rescue the people inside it. Now scale that from one city to many. Electric grids are networks. Fuel distribution is a network. Banking, telecommunications, rail transport, ports, data centers, water treatment, and food logistics are networks. A country does not have to be physically erased to stop functioning normally. Destroy enough major nodes at the same time, and the effects spread into places that were never directly attacked. A supermarket hundreds of kilometers away can be empty because trucks are not moving. A water system can fail because pumps have no electricity. A factory can be intact and still stop because its suppliers are gone. That sounds mundane compared with a mushroom cloud. It is also how modern societies fail. Then comes escalation. Political leaders sometimes discuss the possibility of limited nuclear use. Perhaps one side uses a small number of weapons and expects the other side to respond cautiously, or not at all. The difficulty is that the opponent does not experience your intentions. It sees explosions, warning data, disrupted communications, and military losses. A strike intended as a signal can be interpreted as the beginning of a larger attack. This is where nuclear war becomes a problem of information as much as firepower. Each side has incentives to preserve its ability to retaliate. Each side may fear that waiting makes its forces more vulnerable. Each side knows the other side is thinking the same thing. Even rational leaders can be pushed toward dangerous decisions by incomplete information, damaged command systems, and fear of losing weapons before they can be used. There is no clean scoreboard for this. Suppose country A loses fewer cities than country B. Is A the winner? Suppose A's government survives, but its electric grid, ports, and industrial base do not. Suppose B's military is shattered, but B still manages to destroy A's major population centers. The word victory becomes almost useless unless it includes what happens to the survivors, and the survivors may face consequences far beyond the battlefield. One of the most serious areas of modern research concerns smoke from large urban fires. If enough soot reaches the upper atmosphere, it can reduce sunlight and cool the climate. The size of that effect depends on the number and yield of weapons, what is targeted, how much material burns, and how the smoke behaves in the atmosphere. Estimates are model-based, so there is uncertainty. But uncertainty here does not mean the risk is imaginary. A 2022 study in Nature Food modeled 6 nuclear war soot scenarios and their effects on crops, livestock, and marine food production. In the smallest modeled scenario, global crop calorie production still fell noticeably in the first years. In the largest scenario, the modeled decline in crop calories became catastrophic. The researchers estimated that a major United States-Russia nuclear war could put billions of people at risk of death from famine, including people living in countries that were never attacked. Think about what that means in practical terms. A farm in South America does not need to be hit by a bomb to have a bad harvest. A fishing fleet does not need to be targeted to face changes in marine productivity. A country thousands of kilometers from the conflict can still suffer because sunlight, temperature, trade, fertilizer, fuel, and shipping are global systems. A bag of wheat in a warehouse becomes strategically important. So does diesel. So does a working port. So does the ability to move food from one region to another. None of these things look like nuclear weapons, but after a large nuclear exchange, they may decide who eats. There is another problem with calling such a war winnable. The attacker cannot fully control the damage it causes to itself. Fallout can cross borders. Smoke does not respect alliances. Economic collapse spreads through trade and finance. Refugee movements, epidemics, political instability, and shortages can affect states that were neutral before the first weapon was launched. Not every nuclear scenario produces human extinction. That claim would go beyond what the evidence supports. A limited nuclear use is not physically identical to a full-scale exchange between major arsenals. The scale matters enormously. But that is exactly why nuclear strategy is so dangerous. Once nuclear use begins, nobody can guarantee that the conflict will remain at the level originally intended. The logic of deterrence grew out of this uncomfortable fact. Nuclear weapons are supposed to prevent certain attacks because using them would invite consequences the attacker cannot accept. The threat works only if retaliation is credible. So countries build systems designed to survive an attack, which makes a successful disarming strike harder, which makes starting a nuclear war less attractive. It is a grim kind of stability. Peace is maintained partly by making victory impossible enough that rational leaders avoid testing the system. That was the meaning behind the Reagan-Gorbachev statement in Geneva. The United States and the Soviet Union were geopolitical rivals with enormous nuclear arsenals. They disagreed on almost everything that mattered strategically. Yet they could still agree on one sentence, because nuclear war changes the meaning of winning. You can destroy the enemy's missiles and still lose your cities. You can preserve your government and lose your economy. You can avoid a direct hit and still lose harvests, trade, and infrastructure. You can survive the first week and discover that survival was only the beginning. A conventional war asks which side can impose its will on the other. A large nuclear war asks something much darker. What is left after both sides have tried? That is why the idea that nuclear war cannot be won is more than moral language. It is a description of a strategic trap. The weapons are so destructive, retaliation is so difficult to eliminate, escalation is so hard to control, and the indirect effects can spread so far that the normal rewards of military victory can disappear along with the systems that make a country worth defending. The final paradox is simple. Nuclear arsenals are built to make a state safer by making an attack on it unbearably costly. But if deterrence fails on a large scale, those same weapons can make the cost of winning indistinguishable from defeat.
Thanks for watching! If you enjoyed the video, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment below. See you in the next one!